welcome to this week's vlog. This week we are making a super patriotic cake that will be perfect for when this coronavirus is gone and we can all go out of our houses again and have a cookout, hopefully around 4th of July, which would be perfect for this cake. So my hands are washed, my hair is back, and we're ready to not bake because everything's already baked, but we're ready to play with pastry. So we have our buttercream that we made in our special extra vlog episode. And then I also have a 5-inch red cake. I have an 8-inch blue cake, and then I have an 8-inch red cake back here. These two are already cut and ready to go. I cut the 8-inch red into 4 layers, and then I cut the 8-inch blue into 3 layers. And then we're going to cut this cute little 5-inch guy into 3 layers as well. And we're going to make an American flag out of it, minus the stars, because I haven't figured that one out yet. But we'll have the red, white, and blue. So the first thing I wanted to show you is how to cut layers into your cake. So one of the companies, it might be Wilton, makes one of those nifty, like, it looks almost like a metal string attached to something that looks kind of like a clothes hanger. I'm not really sure what it's called. It's some kind of layer leveler or something or other. I didn't learn how to cut cakes like that. I learned how to just use good old knife. Those things look confusing to me, and I've heard mixed reviews on them. But if you want to try it, give it a try. Let me know how it works for you. But I'm going to teach you the good old-fashioned way, because if it was good enough for them 100 years ago, it's good enough for me. So, like I said, I have an 8-inch red and a 5-inch red, and then I have the 8-inch blue. So the first thing we want to do is, because the red and the blue, the blue and the 5-inch red, I hope this doesn't get confusing, but the blue and the 5-inch red are going to go on the same level. We're going to put this little guy inside of that bigger guy. So we want to make sure that our layers are about the same and our cake height is about the same. So just looking at it, you can also see that this guy unfortunately has this weird little hump. So we're going to get rid of that first. So you want to make sure that anytime you're cutting layers in your cake, that you start with a level surface. So our bottom is obviously level because that was the bottom of the pan. So we're going to put that side down. And we're going to try and make this top as level as possible. It's kind of a really weird shape, and we kind of need some of this height, so it's not going to be perfect. We'll just, put some icing on it. This isn't a cake I'm selling, so I wouldn't do this if I were making money off of it. But since it's just for fun for me, this is what we're going to do. So you want to take your knife, and you want to start on one side, and you just want to kind of saw back and forth. So I have serrated knife. You want to make sure that you have a serrated knife, because it'll do the work for you, and you don't risk hurting your cake layers. You want to make sure your cake is cold, because if your cake is cold, it's a lot easier to work with. It won't be so crumbly, so you don't have as many crumbs to worry about cleaning up before you move to the next step. And it just, in general, it doesn't tear. You'll end up with nice layers from start to finish if your cake is cold. And then another thing that is really helpful is this turntable. This is the Wilton brand. They're really nice ones made by Atico that are metal, that are beautiful, but it's $50, and I just haven't had that in my budget yet to splurge on it, maybe for Christmas one year. But the Wilton one works just fine. When I'm doing heavier cakes, it's not as nice, it doesn't turn as nice, but for these little guys, it's perfect. And it was maybe $10 or $15 at Michael's, plus they always have the 40% off coupons, so it's cheaper than that. So it's a good investment if you're just doing a few cakes a year, if you just wanted to have some fun with pastry. So you're going to start, and you're just going to let your knife do your work for you. You're just going to saw back and forth, and you're just going to turn your turntable. So you're going to do this flat-handed, so you're not cutting your fingers off. But theoretically, like I said, this guy's a weird shape, so it's not going to be perfect. We've got this little guy off, and we have a nice even surface. So now we're going to do our layers. We need to do 3 layers in this guy. They need to be about the same thickness as these layers. So we're just going to guesstimate it. If it's not perfect, then it is what it is. We'll make it work. So we're going to start with we're going to look at our cake and see if you can see this and see, okay, Okay, we got to cut it into thirds, so we're going to go about there, and then we're going to go about there, and that'll give us even layers. So theoretically, if my layers were even over here, and this is the same height as that, and these layers are even, then it should be okay. So we're going to start with our first, and we're just going to go back and forth, and we're just going to gently turn it. And you're not going to go all the way through the cake at one time, because you want to make sure that you're watching on the side, that your line is going to kind of line up with your other line. So if you get back around and your lines meet, then you're perfect. And you're just going to keep going like that. You're going to go around a few times. And then once you get all the way through it, you'll have met in the middle. And then you should be able to just lift it right off. See? Perfect cake layer. So then we're going to start with the other line. And we're going to do the exact same thing. If it makes it easier, you can take this one off and set it aside, but I'm just going to keep it on here so that I know that the sides are matching, because sometimes I do that and then it looks a little wonky and I have to fix it. But so we're just letting our knife work for us. Another good note is that you want your knife, the length of your knife, to be at least as long as your cake. As you can see, my knife for this cake is actually a little bit longer. That's to make sure that you can get all the way to the other side and your layers are still nice and even. I had a really nice long cake knife that I got in pastry school that I took to my first pastry job, and it never came home with me because it disappeared, and I'm really sad. And one of these days I'll invest in a new one, but for now this is what I use. Okay, I had to wash my hand because the red was bothering me. I'm a little bit OCD. I always tell myself I'm too OCD for this job, but we're going to keep plugging along. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out space and the blue guy for this red guy. So we're going to set this guy aside. We're going to set this guy up here. And I'm going to set this guy right on top. Try to make sure that it's like perfectly in the middle as best as you can. And then you're just going to go around. And again, if you're using a serrated knife, you can kind of just go up and down, and the teeth on the knife actually do all the work for you. So it's not a whole lot of work. You just go all the way around. When you get to the end, take this one off. We'll be left with these nice layers. This one didn't go all the way through. Alright, there we go. Okay, so now we have these nice little guys. We're not going to use this for this cake. This is now unnecessary for us and our purposes. But don't throw it away. If you want to really, really, really impress people, throw this into your mixer or put it in a bowl and crumble it up. So you're just going to crumble it up. If you put it in your mixer, put your paddle attachment on it, let it stir around so that it breaks it up. Add whatever leftover buttercream you have to it, and then roll it into balls. Freeze them, and then put lollipop sticks in them, and then get some of the like the chocolate dip that you can get at the store, and dip it in white chocolate or dark chocolate, and you have your own homemade cake pops. People will be so impressed, because then you can have the blue ones, and then you have leftover red cake. You can do red ones, and then you can cover them in white chocolate, and you'll have red, white, and blue cake pops. So super easy, super fun, very impressive to people. People are impressed by the simplest things. It's really amusing. So if you can impress them with something simple, why not? I'm going to take some time to clean this up because this is a mess and it's driving me crazy. So once I'm done wiping everything down, we can move on to adding the icing. But this is an important note. You want to kind of clean as you go. If you clean as you go, you have less to do at the end of your job. But also, if you clean up these crumbs now, you don't have to worry about them getting into your icing later, because you want to keep your icing crumb free so that when you go on to put your icing on the outside, you don't have blue and red crumbs poking through, because it just doesn't look as nice. So go ahead and clean up your workspace, and then when we come back, we'll go ahead and put our cake together. Alright, so we're all cleaned up and we're ready to build. So this is probably one of my most used tools. It's just a flat spatula. I also use this one a lot. I don't use it for cakes because this is what I was taught to use with cakes. So this is my best friend. So we're gonna use this guy. And we're gonna start with the layer, the bottom layer. Like I said, we have 4 layers of red cake for the bottom. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want it to be authentic. Our American flag has 6 white stripes and 7 red stripes. Embarrassing thing to note about Amanda is that when I was a kid, I was obsessed with 2 TV shows. One being Lamb Chop. I had a Lamb Chop bedroom. I had Lamb Chop on everything. I had a lamp. I had a stuffed animal. I had a bedspread. My pillows were Lamb Chop. But the other one that is even more embarrassing was probably Barney. I was really obsessed with Barney. So as you see, I just put a little dollop of icing underneath my cake on top of my cake board. That will, when you refrigerate your cake, if you want to refrigerate your cake, that will help keep it from sliding. So anytime I deliver cakes, I make sure that they're super cold. And the reason being, this icing hardens when it gets cold, so it's less likely for it to get damaged in transit. So if it shifts around in your box a little bit, it's not going to shift around. The cake itself is not going to shift around. So if you put that little dollop of buttercream underneath, then it kind of helps glue it onto the cake board. So, but back to my Barney story. The reason I remember how many stripes and how many colors is because they used to have a song on Barney as a kid. It's like 7 are red and 6 are white, 6 are white, 6 are white. So that's how I remember. Super embarrassing. But I'm going to put buttercream on this guy. As you can see, I broke a rule. My cake is not cold. I took it out. I made it last week and I had it in the freezer, and I took it out of the freezer and left it on the counter all night. And now I have all these red crumbs, and it's just not going to look as nice, but this is where we're at. Welcome to quarantine baking. But, so we've got icing on our first layer, and because there are so many layers of cake, and our layers are actually pretty thin, you don't have to put so much icing in between each layer. So that will be sufficient for that layer. We're going to put on this layer. So if your cake is soft like mine, you can actually get a second cake board and kind of slide it onto that one and then slide it off of that one onto this layer. It will make it a little bit easier, but I don't want to waste a cake board. Which brings me to another topic. Cake boards are really useful. You can buy them at Michael's. I like to buy mine at a local cake store, so shout out to Cake Craft Corner. They're awesome. You can get them, I can get them at my local store for usually $1 a piece, if not less. So it tends to be a lot cheaper than having to buy a pack of, I think it's like 6 or so at Michael's for $5. If I only need one, then why am I going to pay $6 for it if I can pay 25 cents? Like, yeah, I'll have them for next time, but why? And then another thing is, the ones that I get from Michael's have a weird pop-out circle in the middle. I think it's so that you can stick a dowel in your cake to keep it from sliding around, but I don't know, I don't like it. Whereas the ones I get from my cake store are just like completely solid. So, my cake is a little bit wonky because my layers are a little bit wonky on this one because it was not cold when I started to cut it. So if your layers are a little bit wonky like mine, when you add your next layer of cake, you can smush it down. Cake is kind of fragile, but you can manhandle a little bit. So that's a little bit flatter. We're gonna add our next layer of buttercream. Now we get to the fun colors, the red and blue. So, if you notice, I kind of just popped my red ones inside of my blue ones as soon as I took out the blue insert. and then you can just pick them up together. So nice. So if I were making a cake for a client, I wouldn't be just putting my crummy icing on there because I'd want to keep that bowl clean. I'd have a separate bowl that I could put that icing in so that I can use that on the next layer. But since just for me and for your guys' entertainment, it's not that big of a deal. So here we are again. I have this weird lump because of the center pieces. I think one of my red pieces was a little bit curvy, so when I stick this up, it kind of pops up. Again, you can just push that down, make it flat. At this point, before you put your last layer on, I would get down at eye level and just take a good look at it and see if any of your pieces are a little bit wonky. This is your last chance before you put that top crumb coat on to kind of make sure that you're in a good spot. So, now that that's done, I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to get some more buttercream, and then we're going to finish this guy off. We're back. I went ahead and I washed off my tools for this last layer because I didn't want it to be all crummy on the outside. And then I went into my freezer because I keep buttercream in my freezer. But I went to my freezer and I got whatever buttercream I had. Apparently it's caramel, so that's what we're using. The really sad part is I don't remember when I made this or what I made it for. It still tastes good, so we're going to use it. But, again, you would normally want your cake to be cold. As you can see, it's still getting crumbs in my icing. That's okay. So we're just going to put some of this on the top. I am going to use a separate container, so I'm just going to slide that onto there to keep it from getting crummy. And then I'm not going to dip this back into my bowl because there's some crumbs on it. I'm going to use my clean spatula and I'm going to stick it on top, but we're going to work that onto the sides. So we're just going to pull that down to the side. I'll try and do it this way so you can see. We're just going to kind of smooth it on. It looks like a hot mess right now, but we're going to fix it. So then you'll throw this into your refrigerator for a few minutes and let it set. I would go around the bottom just to get any of that extra so that it doesn't stick to your cake turntable. So then I would stick it in your fridge and let it cool down. And then when your icing is hard to touch, you can pull it out and we'll do the next part. Alright, so our cake has been in the fridge for about 15 minutes and as you can see the icing is pretty hard. So we're going to go ahead and do our next coat. Normally when I do cakes for orders, I will do 3 or 4 more coats, like thin coats of icing on it, and just each time I go, I'll clean it up a little bit more than I did the last time. And that just helps make sure that you get out all of the imperfections that your cake might have had before you start adding icing. It makes sure that you can have like perfectly straight sides, a perfectly even top, and it's just easier if you go like thin layer by thin layer than if you just slapped a bunch on it and tried to like smooth it out that way. This one isn't for an order, it's just for me, so I'm probably not gonna like smooth coat it and make sure that it's perfectly nice looking. So I'm just gonna start with the sides. I'm just gonna add enough so that it's kind of covering. It's really hard to see it that close. Covering so you can't see the color underneath. I'm gonna go kind of heavy-handed so that when I go back through to clean it up, it's completely covered. So now that the sides are covered, I'm gonna just put what I have left right on top. Make sure it goes all the way to the edges. So then you want to clean up your sides first. So I'm just going to go around. And then you'll just kind of pull it into the middle from the edge. Then I'm actually going to put like little ruffly guys on this just to give it a little bit of character. So I'm just going to go around, and then you'll just move your knife up a little bit as you go. This is the problem with the cheaper cake circle or cake stand, as you see it kind of like does weird things. If you had like the nice metal one, you wouldn't really have this issue. Alright. And then I'll do the same around the top. There's our cake. You can do some fun things to it. Another thing I thought about a good use for your cake scrap is if you crumble it and just make it into crumbs, put it on a baking sheet, throw it in the oven at 325 or 350 or so for like 5 minutes. Not very long, just long enough to make it dry it out so that it's more like crumbs, like stale breadcrumbs almost. And then you can actually sprinkle that on the top, or you can coat the outside with it. Like sometimes you'll go into the grocery store and you'll see the red velvet with the crumbs on the outside. I like to toast it instead of just putting straight crumbs on it, because the crumbs, especially with it being dyed this much, it's gonna, the crumb is gonna, the color is gonna leak into your buttercream and it's gonna make it discolored, but also it'll get soggy. So the good thing about toasting it first before putting it on the outside is that because it's like stale breadcrumbs basically, it's got that nice crunchy consistency. It also gives it a nice different texture that your cake didn't have before. So, and then if you wanted to do some kind of border, like pipe some kind of border on the bottom, I would get a larger cake circle. So since this is an 8-inch cake, I would get a 10-inch cake circle and move it to that, which to move it, you would take your two knives and you would stick them in opposite ends underneath your cake board. And then you would just move it to your other cake board. But for this cake, since it's just the two of us in the house right now, we're not going to eat a whole 8-inch cake. So I'll probably end up throwing it in my refrigerator so that the icing gets hard again. And then I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap and then put a layer of aluminum foil over it. And that kind of helps seal in the freshness. I'm going to throw it in my freezer. And you can keep it frozen. Like people used to do the wedding cake toppers and freeze them for a year. We did that with ours when we got married, and it was still really good when we took it out of the freezer. You just have to make sure that you wrap it properly. So plastic wrap and then a layer of aluminum foil. You can do a couple layers of aluminum foil. That helps keep the frost off of it, and the plastic wrap keeps the freshness in. So I did want to cut this guy so that we can see what the inside looks like. So cut out a nice little slice. Alrighty, there's our flag cake. So I went really light on the icing in between the layers because I only had the little bit that I had and I didn't want to have to make more because again it's just the two of us. So you can go a little bit heavier, I wouldn't go too heavy because that's a lot of icing, but yeah, there's our American flag cake. I'm all ready for 4th of July. I'm ready to go outside. I'm ready to see people again. Thanks, Corona.